Hello YouTube, hello viewers, and welcome back to yet another episode of creating our Laravel API. Pretty much social media, I guess. Thanks for joining me for this episode. I know I've been away for a week. Sorry for that. We had lots of birthdays and stuff going on. There was my birthday, and then my children's birthdays, and then I was a little bit lazy. But yeah, I'm coming back with obviously these episodes, and I'm sorry for that. Obviously, work's also quite a lot as well, so there's a lot of things going on that I'm trying to juggle, including these videos. So, but we need to carry on. We got to a point where we had our application at a point where we were sending emails, and we could then activate or use the activation link. In this episode, we're going to use this activation link that we have, and we're going to actually activate the user inside our database. So if we just get our database open quickly, so we know where we are. So if we open up local, hopefully not all my stuff pops up, which it has. So we'll just get rid of that. There we go. And on my YouTube social, if we have a look at our users table, remember our user table had this email verified at here. And we're going to start plugging some information into this so we make sure that the user is verified. And we also probably going to change a bit of logic. So when we log in, we make sure they are verified. If they're not, we'll just send a message and then we'll work from there. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to jump into our PHP Storm or whatever application you're using or IDE you're using. And obviously we need to make sure we have a route set up. Now, remember in the last episode, I did create this route here called activate email and then the code, which was here. I don't think we actually did anything with this. So if we look at the auth controller and if we scroll down, no, I didn't set up an endpoint for this. We just set it up within that episode. So we're actually going to create this and use it. So if you haven't got it set up, basically we're just making a post route to this URL here called activate email, and this little piece of information here is just saying, well, we're going to pass some information to it. Normally people put IDs or you can put whatever you want into it, but in this case we put codes. The idea though is you want to wrap it inside parentheses just so Laravel knows that it's some type of sequence number that's being passed in. And then obviously it's going to go to your controller, and then we're going to pass it to a function. So we need to make sure that works. However, how does this work? Well, let's just check this. So let's actually just quickly make an activate email inside our auth controller. So we're going to do public function activate email, like so. And then we'll just do that. And we'll just put a die dump in here so that way we can see that's working. So we can say we got here and close it off. And let's jump into our Postman, and we need to make ourselves a request for this. So remember, we've got a few here. So I'm just going to copy this, might as well. So this is called register. So if I just duplicate this, and we're just going to call this activate email. We've been through this many times. If you're a bit confused about setting this up, go look at my previous tutorials. The whole series is there on what I've been doing with this. We're not going to be passing anything to it, so we can actually trash everything here. We don't need it. Our headers are obviously needed for accept and blah, blah, blah with the application JSON. And then our body, we don't need any of this because we're not passing anything in the body. The URL we can quite easily pick out, because if we jump into our terminal, we can just do PHP artisan route list, like so, route list. And this should give us a list of all our routes that we have. And we can see here we've got this API uses activate email with code here. So if we go back to Postman, let's actually just copy this like so, up to that /, jump to our Postman, and let's stick that in like so. Pretty simple. And if we hit send on here, we get not found. That's because we're not actually passing anything to this yet, because it's just a /. If we had to pass a number, for example, and hit send, we now get the die dump. So this is why it's very important that we have this code that's being sent in here. So if you have a look at the preview, it says we got here. This is very important because remember inside our email, so if we pop back over to the email, if you look at the bottom left corner of my screen, you can see that there's a /zexc blah. You can also just, if you want to copy link address, maybe open up Notepad and paste it in, you can see inside here, there is an activation number here. And we're going to use that. So we're actually just going to copy this. Oh, actually, we'll just make a new one, to be honest. So how does this all work? Well, basically we've got this activation email here. And what we've been using previously is this thing called request. we're not going to be using request actually. We're actually just going to take the code like so. So we're just going to call it, you could call this whatever. It doesn't matter what we call it. And in here, we're just going to call $code. All right, just to see that this is working. So in my postman, actually, let's just grab this so we can play with this little bit of information. And we'll just pop it over this one here, like so, and hit send. You'll notice that we get the value that comes from this URL string here. And this is very important because obviously we're going to need that for when we want to make sure or check against that user has been registered. So once we've got that, that's pretty impressive. If we have a look at what we have here, remember we had this user activation tokens and we've also got this users. Now, the user activation tokens these were created when we made the user and the tokens were being saved with the user ID. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to check to see if this token is actually valid. And again, it's very simple. I'm going to keep it within the controller this time because for your homework, I want to see if you could separate it. And then in the next episode, we're going to break it all into pieces. So it's just a lot more easier and a lot more short of a video. So let's do a check. So if we had to do something like this, remember the table that we're using is user activation tokens. So we could say check token equals, and then user activation token. Oh, we actually got the service, so we can actually pop into there if we wanted to. And with that user activation token service, actually let's check. So we've got it here called this service. Okay, this is perfect. So we can jump into that service and we can say check token. So we're actually not going to do it all in the controller because it's there, we might as well use it. And we're just going to pass the code in. So remember, this is our repository pattern, and we're just going to do our business logic inside this check token here. So let's just grab this information and jump into the service. Now that we're inside this service, we can put some logic in here. So remember, we just kind of follow the similar naming conventions, so function, and in our auth controller, if we go back to the bottom, we call this check token. So check token, and we want to make sure we get the value. So this is going to be our code, like so. So our code, and we're going to need to write some logic. And we can do exactly the same type of thing here, that we can check the repository contract to see if that token actually exists. So we can say token, or we can even call it check token again if we wanted to. You can call it whatever. Remember, variables are what you want to make of them. We can say this activation token repository contract, and we want to say check token. Kind of the same type of stuff over and over again, but don't forget the service is there for our logic. You shouldn't really be putting anything inside the controller. So I was doing a bad thing. I was just getting lazy. I need to stop being lazy. Right, so we need to make this inside our contract, so we can quite easily just copy this, jump into our contract, and we're just going to duplicate this and paste in our new function. And we can just do a little comment block like so. And then we obviously need to update our little repository. So because we get this red line, that means that it doesn't exist. So we need to make it. And my IDE is nice. So we can just quickly grab our check token. Now it's just going to be as simple as just running a very simple check to see if the actual token exists. So let's do that. So we're going to wrap this around a try catch. You don't have to, but I just do it just to debug, especially for this tutorial series. And I suggest you do this so you can actually see what's going on. If something breaks, the try catch will tell you exactly what's happening. Never use the DDs, but it does help us in this tutorial. So all we need to do is just check against the token. So we can quite easily say $check token equals, and then we're just going to do a query. So user activation token, like so. And we're going to say where. So we're going to check where. And if we have a look inside our table, I don't know what just happened there. My keyboard is dying and I can't afford another one. So if we have a look at our database, we have this thing called token. So this is really important that we can check against this token here. So we're going to check token, and it's going to be against the code. like so. And obviously we can just run first on there to make sure that we get the first result back. And then all we have to do is just say return check token. We could have actually just wrapped that or just said return this if you wanted to. That would have been fine as well. We need to just finish off our little exception here. So we can say exception $E. And then if we have an issue, we can just die and dump a message. Normally you'd put some logic behind here, but because it's a tutorial series, we're just doing things nice and quick. So obviously you can see what's actually happening. Let's just comment block this so we can do the top one here too. There we go. And if we head back, so back into our check token, and let's just put a die dump here on check token here. And let's see what happens. So if we go into Postman and hit our send request, we can see we get a response back. And this is really important because now we just got we pretty much sent a query off to our database, say, okay, well, does this token actually exist? And if it does, just send it back to us. That's perfect because now we know that we have got a token. And now we can just do some simple logic against this token. So we can say if open this token. So we can say if we've got this token, okay, we're going to do some logic. Do some logic. And then obviously if we don't, we can just always return can't even spell, return error. This is basically saying that the token doesn't exist. I mean, this could be a numerous things. We can check against time. We could do all sorts of nice things against this token. So they have a limited amount of time to activate their account. But obviously we just wanted to make sure that we check the token. Once we have the token, we can then activate that user. Pretty easy, right? So let's have a look here. So we want to now activate this token, but the problem that we have is that the token, if we have a look at that response again, the token is just a token. We actually don't even know what user actually used that token because we're not really bothered about that. But what we do have is this cool user ID here. And we did that deliberately so we can actually grab the user ID from our users table, so 23, check that that token exists. If it does, we'll then activate that user. And we'll just make sure he's verified. And that's dead simple to do. And I mean, we're going to do it right now. So here, our first bit of logic is we want to get that user ID because we're going to use that for the majority of this part of this check. And to do that, because we've got this token, we can quite simply just pull off the token. So if we have a look at Postman, we can see that we have this user ID part of the attribute. So we can copy that, and inside our code, we can say check token, and we can get user ID. And that will set our user ID. Now, what we need to do is we need to then activate our user. But the problem is we don't really have our user service or anything inside here. So we can quite simply just add it into this if we wanted to inside this activation token service. Or we can just push straight into the repository contract if we want to. Again, this is up to you how you want to approach it. Or you could actually come back into the controller and then pop out again because inside our controller, we have a user service. So we could do that too. But we'll just do it inside the check token just for this tutorial. So what we can quickly latch into is our user repository contract. I'm going to do user repository contract. And we're just going to do the same thing here. So basically we're just plugging into our database so we can do some checks really. That's all it is. And then we can just do it all in one spot. And we just do protected and we paste it into here. I've done this many times. I know I'm doing it really quick this time, but it's because we've done it over and over again. It's just easier for other people if we just continue with the tutorial. So now we have access to our repository contract. We can easily just do a query here. And it's simple to do. We can say this user repository contract, and we're going to do something. So remember we had a register user here. We're actually going to say activate user, like so. Okay. And basically this is going to send off to our contract and we're going to activate the user, but we're going to need the user ID parameter to be passed in there because we're going to need the ID of the user. So what we can do is again, is just we can copy this bit of section. jump into our contract, and we're just going to make a public function, and we're just going to copy that bit of information we had for our user ID. And obviously this is an int, so we can type in that if you want. And we can comment block. And then all we need to do is in our user repository is just do the logic. So public function, activate user. And now we're going to do the same similar thing here. So we're going to look for the user. And then once we found the user, we're just going to set his activation. Dead simple. Wrap it inside a try catch. Do the same thing over and over again in every single episode. So hopefully it'll get drilled into your head that it's important to run try catches all the time. And then basically we're just going to do a query. So we're going to get user equals, and then we're going to go user. So remember, it comes off our app, where, like so. And we're going to do where, actually need to put it in square brackets on the where. And we can just do ID, and then the ID is equal to user ID. And we can run first on there, like so. Let's actually see this working before we go any further. So if I just put a die dump here inside the user, like so. So what's going to happen is we're going to come into, actually I need to finish this off, otherwise it's going to shout at me. So just put $E in there. So what's going to happen is when we hit this activation user, hopefully we're going to get our user who belongs to this user ID back. So let's jump into Postman and hit the send. And there we go. So we've run into our user, and we can see that the actual user is Wazza7 here. If we go back to the email, we definitely know this was Wazza7 because it's 2 Wazza7 here. So that's perfect as well. So now all we need to do is just set this email verified to a value. And again, this is dead simple to do. We just go back into our code, and we're going to say on here, user, so user, and we're going to say on the user, remember we have this field called email verified at? We're just going to grab that information, and we're just going to pop into here. Make sure that it's all correct spelling wise, and we can just run carbon now. Like so. So we're just setting a date against that user when they were verified. Again, this is dead simple. Carbon is just a piece of, you could call it software, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, but it's basically just a plugin extension for Laravel that handles dates. And this, I mean, you can read about it and it's dead easy to use. It's not hard at all. And so basically we're going to be setting the email verified to today's date. And then all we're going to do is we're going to save what we've just done. And that's it. And then obviously what we can do is we can then return back, return $user, like so. And obviously if we have a problem, we could just probably die dump the exception here if we do have an issue. So we can do $E and then get message. So all this is doing is it goes, finds our user that we're passing with the user ID that belong to that code. We then verify that user, we save the user, and we return that back. So let's jump backwards again. So we're going to go back to activate user. So we know that this is now activated. Now all we need to do is just get rid of that token. So remember this token that we had? We could just delete it out the database now if we wanted to. So we could just do this and then activation token repository contract, and we're going to just call this delete token because there's no need for the token now, so we can actually remove it. So we can jump into where our check token is, and don't forget we need to pass the code in because we need to find it. So we can pass this, or actually we could probably do check token because it's the object, and we could just do delete like so. So actually that's a quicker way to do it because we've got the object already, because we checked the token. Now we've got the token. Once we've done activated the user, we remove the token out of the system, and that's it. And now what we can do is we can just return something. So we can return some text to say user has been activated, like so. And then the error, we could just return user has not been activated in this case. Remember, this is very quick code that we're doing. This is all done on the fly. I don't plan these sessions. So obviously return messages will be a lot more better that you can do yourself. So now we have all that in place. let's see if this actually works. So if we go back to check token, we have this check token here. Now we just need to get our response. So let's just, I'm sure we made the response helper, didn't we? Yeah, so we can say $this response helper success response. And in there we need true. Then we can have, the message that we pass in is activate email. And then the date we're going to pass in is whatever happens on this here. Now remember, it's not going to really handle the fails really well because obviously we're just setting some text. So it might be worth putting an if in there maybe, and then maybe setting this to be null instead of text. Again, that's entirely up to you how you want to work the code. So hopefully this should now work. So if I actually try and post to this and hit send, I get a 200. So let me actually see if that's been activated. So let's have a look at the user. Refresh. Okay, so he's been activated. That's good. Oh, I've done it again. I really need to stop doing this. I didn't put a return there. This is getting terrible now. I keep forgetting to put a return. So basically we would have got the response message back. So we know that it's worked because if we check the database, he has now been verified. Spot on. The token that we used has now been removed. It doesn't belong anywhere inside the database. So that's how you kind of work the flow. If I try to send this again, notice that I get this message and saying, user's not been activated. This is not the best option because don't forget, this doesn't exist. So actually the error message is incorrect. So obviously in the next episode that we'll do, we're going to clean this up a bit more because at the moment it's very unneat and we're kind of running out of time. So in the next episode, we're going to clean this up a lot more when it comes to activating. But the main part of this was to make sure that we can get the user activated so we have an email verified at, and we actually remove the token out of the system. A lot to take in, I know, and I know I've been away for a while. Don't worry, the content will be coming in again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. So if you did, make sure you hit the like button. If you really like it, hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to share this with your friends if you really did like it. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.